Welcome back. Another Friday, another wonderful thrill-packed Friday in the summer of 2024. August, what is today? August 23rd. I don't even know. Christmas has got to be, might be under 100 days away, but I don't know.
150, 170, something like that.
It's just around the corner. Let's see. The election is now in full swing. We're going to be doing that between now and the end of fall. Business, we'll talk about it as we get into it. Still experiencing a little bit of a lull. Technology is still going leaps and bounds. Art told me a little bit about something that happened at Konica Minolta up in Japan, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And we've got an excellent guest this afternoon, Dale, who I'm pretty sure if anyone knows anything about what's going on in the copier world and sales, knows Dale and has heard of his stuff. We're going to talk to him a little bit about how to sell, and probably Dale in this situation, the economic situation that we're in. But Dale, I forget, are you in Florida right now? Where are you at? Not in Florida.
Right now, I'm living in East Tennessee, but I'm in Mississippi right now.
Oh, okay. So you're down south. Yeah, cool. Art, how's business?
Same as last week. Not much going on. It's been slow for the probably the last 4 weeks. Dale can appreciate this. Spending all my time just prospecting, and August is a great month to prospect because you can build for the end of the third quarter, and then hopefully carry into the fourth quarter.
Going to the third and fourth turn, I guess is what they would call it, right? Going from NASCAR language. So good that you brought that up, Dale. Now, maybe you just familiarize me. I'm familiar with what you did, what you've done, how you tell people or converse with other salespeople to get attention. And let's just given that the economic situation is that it is, and there is sort of a slump going on in terms of sales. In your opinion, pure opinion, what would you recommend any sales rep do when experiencing this cyclical downturns? Because it happens all the time, right? There's a pattern to it, and it doesn't matter what industry. But just off the cuff, off the top of your head, the guy's trying to sell copiers and run into a slow turn. What are your few words of advice?
Yeah, I personally would recommend that people be careful about doing the same thing over and over again, and kind of like perseverance is much different than the identity of what insanity breeds when we expect somebody to just suddenly change their mind by just doing the same thing to them over and over again. So I like the perseverant mindset, but the perseverant mindset for me in downturns like this is, what could I be doing different? Am I part of the local economic development commission in my county or my city? Am I going to in-person networking events that may be a little like non-traditional, but are attracting my buyer in a non-traditional way? Am I thinking less about volume of calls and emails and more about volume of the experience that I'm giving to people? So I went through an economic downturn in 2008 and 9, and I was just a kid. I was 22 and 23 selling copiers. And we just kept doing something different every day. Every single day, instead of saying, let's bang the phones, bang the emails, we started saying, well, what can we do? What should we do? We started facilitating lunches, and we would do them in our office or at the community centers or with the nonprofit groups. I mean, we did everything you could possibly imagine during that time. And so I would just tell people to think outside the box when the box starts to close in on you, and really just take some risks. It's if you're not financially stable as well, or at the most, I would say. So you might hear this and think like, well, yeah, if you've got the money to burn to go and try all this new stuff. Well, I was broke as a living joke back in those times that I just mentioned. And I did not let that stop me. No matter what it took, I was going to get through, and I was going to continue to just be myself, be different, and make waves inside of the industry.
Right. So Dale, that's great advice. Let me ask you to put a little point on this. So when you say do things differently, are you speaking probably on both platforms? Do something differently in terms of how I would be selling prior, as well as do something differently than the competition? Is it a combination of both, or do you even worry about the competition? What do you think?
I think it's less about worrying about the competition as much as like I started in those years as well too, and more in 2010 when we did this more often. But I would have like, everybody out for a beer that sold copiers at other companies, and we'd all
Oh,
get together. We wouldn't talk about deals. We wouldn't talk about clients. All that stayed outside of the meetup, but we would talk about what are we doing, and essentially would share best practices around prospecting, share best practices around negotiation, share best practices in all aspects, and just kind of built our own little peer group. So I think it is important to
hmm.
understand what my peers are doing and my colleagues are doing different, and just similar, just the same. But I do think ultimately it is about what are you doing that's not working. So the more that like preference typically tends to come into play in these types of situations, and we lean into preference because it's comfortable.
Yeah.
And so the idea is like, well, where are you being too comfortable, and where do you need to risk more in the process of building your business and getting through the economic times? Because I will tell you too that even though things were really bad for us, especially for me and my dad at the business that he was running and I was selling out of in 2008 and 2009, but they got better every week, every month, every quarter, because we never gave up on this idea of trying to change the game, trying to step up to the plate and do things just a little bit different for ourselves so that we didn't get into the slump of insanity.
Mm.
And ultimately so that we woke up every day thinking we had something to look forward to instead of something to like deal with and have to worry about. And that motivated us and drove us into a record-breaking year in 2010 and 2011 back to back, and he ended up selling his business
Mm-hmm.
after that, because of how profitable we were, and everybody was chomping at the bit to get a hold of my dad's 29-year organization, and he was ready to step out for sure at that point too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a mixture of both. But I would really encourage people not to think about competition in that way. I feel that there's enough business out there for all of us. And when you find your competition in a deal, and it's, one of your buddies that you were grabbing those beers with, man, it is so much more fun to
Mm-hmm.
compete against someone
Yes,
that
it
like you
is.
love and you like. It really is. It's a lot of fun. There's some bantering. And it's all in good faith that that you're going to win or lose, and you're going to try your hardest to get that win. And if you lose, you learn a lot because you put in that extra, 10%, 20% that you normally wouldn't.
Yep.
If it's just a strange person that you're going up against, and it
That's right.
creates the better people ultimately at the end of the day, which makes us better at sales.
I agree.
That's right.
I agree.
Yeah.
And you always win from losing. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always something good. Yeah. And I like what you said about the insanity thing, because I mean, Art and I, we've been through. Art, can you remember your first economic? Mine was the Reagan years, or that recession
Oh,
during.
Lord. I really don't think we had one in the industry until 2009, because from when I started in
Wow,
1980, I don't think we had a downturn ever.
that's interesting. And yeah, I can see that. That's interesting. So, which kind of dovetails into Dale's thoughts, is because it was so good when times were quote unquote bad or whatever, it didn't really impact the industry. So you could continue to do the same things over and over. Unfortunately, your success, or not yours specifically, but the success you come out only reinforces those bad practices.
And Dale hit the
Interesting.
Dale hit the nail on the head that, years and years ago, there was more than enough business for everyone in
Oh my
our
God.
type of industry. Our industry has changed now, right? There's not as many potential accounts out there as there
Yeah.
was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I agree with Dale. You got to change things up. You can't be
You do. Yeah.
you can't be how can I say stay in that same mold. You've got to challenge yourself and do something different.
It's real interesting.
Do
Yeah.
the uncomfortable things.
Yeah, uncomfortable. Yeah, Dale touched on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another question for you, Dale, and this, because let's consider like back to 2008, or maybe even before then. What can you point out? What's changed the most, in your opinion, between in the selling process? Right, it's a wide open question, but what do you think has changed the most in the last, what would it be, 16 years? We go from 2008.
I would say access. I'd say access, the buyer's access is so much different now than it was. So now when we cold call, we pretend as if like we have something for someone that they don't know about. But in most cases, these people have access. They know what they want, they know what they need, they know what's going on in the world. So outbound is different because of that. You know, we tend to take this stance of, and this is in all industries. I train into all kinds of different industries these days. Copiers is only about 30% of our total client base at this stage, paying client base.
Cool.
And so we've diversified greatly, and we've used a lot of the stuff that we've learned in the copier space and how we've diversified in the copier space with the way we sell into other industries, which is kind of a crazy thought. It should be the opposite, right? The copier world should be like the old school narrative, right? But really, it's kind of like it'll always be, in my opinion at least, the foundation of sales, because it is very much a commodity sale, and it is, even if people don't use the copier the same way that they used to use it, they still look at it the same way when it comes down to it. This is the least price. This is the service price. You're the cheapest. Let's go with you, right? It's like the typical narrative in people's heads. So unless we're selling different, and ultimately we're creating that impact, we're causing a sense of wonder, we're creating undeniable curiosity, we're building that rapport, trust in those relationships with people, it's the same thing, right? But going back to the idea of like what changes, it's all access. People love to get on the phone these days and say, hey, here's some things that I can help with. Well, the thing is that like in most cases, the buyer goes, yeah, we already know that's an option. we know that. Like, there's more to the story these days because there is so much access. So it's, well, we've been trying to fix that, and these are the ways that we've been doing it based on our own research. And a lot of the time, the buyer gets in their head in these days with access that they've got it figured out, and because they've got AI, and they've got the endless resource, which is Google. And so again, because they're not experts, ultimately, I still believe that the salesperson serves a purpose when ultimately they are completely bought in to what it is that they're providing for their community from that servant leadership perspective. Otherwise, I think not much has changed, to be quite frank with you. But access is huge, right? Because access changes the narrative so greatly. Art said 1980s, right? I'm not aging him here. He said it. So 80s to let's say 2010, right? 2008 and 9 really is, because I felt the change for sure. Because I had sold like in high school for my dad when I'd like come to sell at the office, and I'd watched him sell in those years as well too. But in 08, everything changed, But let's just say from the 80s to 08, okay, just like for argument's sake, nobody had access. Nobody had access. If you came walking in the door and you sold for a company that, especially one that nobody had heard of, they wanted to speak with you. Oh, okay. And mostly because of the way that our industry works, and it's notorious for that. It churns through reps. It's very commodity driven. It's very transactional. And because of those things, people kind of, the dealers in most cases were a little too comfortable once they got you in the door. The customer service was, if they call for service, we'll be real good to them, right? And because of those reactive perspectives, the industry, I think, for the most part, at those times especially, it accommodated itself when it came to the way that we all sold. But now people have access. They have access. They know that there's 17 copier companies in their backyard. They'll talk to other people on forums and through procurement communities and financial communities to ask, hey, who do you use and who have you tried? And there's just a whole different slew of access at this point that completely changes the narrative of the way that we approach people and how we educate them on who we are.
Yeah, I'd say that's a big one. That's probably the biggest, and it's around the time frame of the interwebs when it really started to hit, and Google and searches and things. Yeah, interesting. And access, yep, because we used to be the holders of the info, the spec sheet. So we were the walking spec sheets.
Yeah.
Boy, very interesting, Dale. Well, I'm glad that you brought up the work in different industries, right? Because it's always been, I know Art feels the same way. It's always been my belief that if you can sell copiers, you can sell just about anything. Honest to God, right? And boy, when was it years ago that our Xerox reps were getting recruited away by pharmaceuticals right? Or whoever. Even it's like in the old days with IBM. If you could get an IBM trained sales rep, that was a good thing because they went through the whole program, whatever it was worth. But Dale, talk about, I don't know, either the parallels or the differences between sales approaches from vertical to vertical, however you've organized or diversified your niches. Because I mean, I know there's I don't know. That's why I'm asking. How solid, everyone sells. How similar is sales from industry to industry nowadays? And is it getting more diverse or more homogenated? What do you think?
Yeah, I think in sales, I think the issue is right now is across the board that people are kind of everybody, every industry, every salesperson in any vertical is very leaned into like the shortcuts, the narrative of the shortcuts, like what's the hack, what's the tactic that gets me to the end result really quickly. And so everybody's kind of learning the same thing because of that, if you will. So to me, and from my perspective, that the industries are kind of all bleeding into each other, and really SaaS is the one that's driving the narrative at this stage. Where SaaS is it's a very commoditized concept. It's also the living space where, and the only space, like I think we can all agree to this, where you'll get a $25,000 quote for some software, you'll push back just a little bit or threaten to go somewhere else, and all of a sudden that $25,000 is $9,000, like just like that, right? So it's this space that's extremely ruthless and cutthroat, just the same, and almost to an extent a mirror image. And this is no offense to anybody in the industry, we train tons of people, but a mirror image to what was the perception for the generation before me of what a used car salesman was. Yep. Somebody that was just basically like, hey, you came in the front door, that's the sticker price. I'm going to lead with it as long as I can until you finally start making me feel like I'm not going to be able to make money off you. And then I'm going to become desperate and I'm going to push this across the finish line however I possibly can, even if I bake things into the contract or I put it in the extended warranty or, whatever the case, right?
Yeah.
No, I think that's kind of the disservice that sales is doing to itself right now. Is it's basically like repeating the sins of the past, if you will, in new manners. But I feel like for the most part, the standard of the way that people sell in SaaS is adopted across the world and across industries, where it's, well, we have to do X, we have to do Y, and we have to do Z. We prospect like this, we use parallel dialers, we make mass calls, we send mass emails, these types of concepts, and everybody's jumping in on it because everybody thinks that, oh, this is the shortcut. These guys are making hundreds of millions of billions of dollars. They've got these stacked sales teams inside of their organizations. They're spending all this money. They're doing all these lavish things. They're doing Super Bowl commercials. This must be what success looks like, and we create it like X. Now, what I will say that I find very interesting too is that, again, like we train in so many different verticals. It's kind of fun to think about, actually. And a lot of these folks they're very bought into the way it's always been in most cases. So they typically engage us because they're tired of that. But even when we come in, they admit it and they say, this is like the hardest thing you'll ever do is break us of these habits. It's kind of like the admission. And so I think it's different for everybody. And I shouldn't say think, I've witnessed it be very different for everybody, that everybody kind of has their own like thing that they've bought into that they think is the truth about sales. And it's kind of in different places for everybody. Some people it is literally in prospecting. Other people it is literally in the presentation. For most, it's somewhere in that stage of closing the business. But I find similarities ultimately, from one to the next around the attitude, right? That people don't want to like break away from the way that it's always been, because there is some kind of formula attached to it of comfort, because people are still buying. So there is some type of safety that people kind of lean into. But I don't know, guys. I find that to be very mediocre, in my opinion. And like, let's say that you're a top rep and you're making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. To me, in my stages of being the top rep and hitting those types of numbers, I was constantly sitting back and thinking, yeah, but I want to make $3,000, $4,000, and $5,000 a year. And then I was thinking, I want to make $4,000, $5,000, and $600,000 a year. I want to make $500,000, $600,000, and $700,000. So if I continue to have $300,000 years for more than 2 years, I'm going to sit back and ask myself, what do I need to change in order to to make this better for myself. And I will say too that in our organization, I know that we portray ourselves as training, but ultimately we're like basically running live workshops every day. And what I mean by that is like we're coming, my family and I are coming back from Dallas right now. We were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Oklahoma City. We're in Dallas for a week doing on-site training with folks. So we're not just sitting with people going, hey, you know, here's what we teach, what we preach, and now go do it. We're knocking on the doors. We're listening to the buyers. We're meeting with procurement. We're meeting with CFOs and the generation of now, not just the guys and girls that have been, but like Gen Z that are buyers, like people that are younger than me that are buying and asking them the questions, you know, how can we do better? What should we do different? And we're getting the kind of feedback that, you know, a lot of folks aren't getting. And because of that, when I look at sales as a whole, I think the one thing everybody's doing wrong is they are not seeking to, even though the buyer knows everything about us, right? We are not seeking to know everything about our buyer. We're not seeking to understand their environments. We're not seeking to meet those people where they are at all, period. And that's what's creating like this distinct common ground for all of us. Like none of us are doing that, and we have to do it more.
Wow, that's, you know, that's been a comment. That particular argument, that particular statement is applicable for the last 3 or 4 decades, no matter where we're at with it, right? And again, personal observation is I've always felt that we don't put enough into that side of it, and we're not managed to do that, right? Probably fall in line with what you're thinking. We're managed to make 100 dials, 10 contacts in one appointment. We're managed to do that. We're not managed to learn as much as we can about, I don't know, the manufacturing industry or the screw it or whatever it is that gives us more business acumen. But that's also good that you say that, because anyone who does is going to be that top 3 to 5%. I guess, I hope, right? I mean, it's got to be. Okay.
Hey,
for sure. I would agree with you 100%.
Dale, I got a question for you. So when you spoke before about the old school salespeople, right? And they go in and they look to make a killing and they'd only drop, and when they weren't going to get the deal, and all of a sudden, instead of the price being $25,000, it was $9,000. But would today's salespeople be better off giving the best price to the client that they can live with? And with that, there's no tension between the buyer and the seller, and the seller's like, okay, well, you know, I've given the client the best price I can give. So as a salesperson, you know, if there's a little balking from the client, maybe I'm going to drop back the value points to, you know, move this forward. Your thoughts?
I think this comes back to what we were just talking about ultimately for me, which is that, see, we don't seek to understand. And so the problem is like, hey, I'll give you a great example, all right? Let's say I've got a paid community and I'm using some kind of software to facilitate that paid community. And let's just say that ultimately in that paid community, I've got 10,000 people paying $5 a month, okay? Quick and easy math. So I'm making all this cheddar off of this paid community, right? It's the thought process. So here comes another company that wants me to switch my paid community over to theirs, right? They come to me and they literally, they don't even think to ask me what I make, what my budget is, and ultimately what I provide. Instead, they come to me and they say, look at all these fancy features, look at all these amazing benefits. We'll cut your cost by 10% or whatever they say. And then they still price themselves like way out of the ballpark to begin with, right? Because ultimately they're just doing what they think is the standard instead of understanding where I'm coming from, what I need, and what makes the most sense for me as the buyer. So if I'm selling coffee machines, a great example, if I'm selling coffee machines and I'm selling to ABC company and they've been in business for 35 years and they do 48-month leases on average throughout those 35 years of business. It's a lot of leases that they've done, and they're very consistent with that. Now, have we ever sat down with them and gone, hey, have you guys ever looked back at like the 90s and saw like, what is your lease payment and what was your budget for those lease payments in comparison? Like, how many employees did you have? How much paper were you pushing? How much of it was an ROI for you because the business needed that paper? Have you ever gone back and looked at those legends? Have you ever gone to see what that looks like for yourself and for your organization? Like, just that simple question sometimes can unlock dialogue that you never even thought it would unlock in the first place. And it takes us to a place too to understand like how we've minimalized the concept of the copy machine inside of that office. And it helps us to, instead of just saying to ourselves, what's our best price? We say, what is it that this person is truly seeking to achieve and accomplish? And how can price accommodate that bigger picture perspective? And this is what it opens up for so many reps that aren't thinking about it. So you see, reps like to lead with, now that we're multifaceted in the technology space in the copier world, right? We sell IT, we sell software, we sell water coolers. I've seen it all, right? Like we have so much product, but that's what we do is we just go in and say, oh, you don't want a copier? What about a water cooler? What about IT? Instead of asking very important and poignant questions like I just posed to understand budgets, process, and literally imposing, okay, well, why don't we get your lease down another $150 because we're going to get rid of these two machines over here and we're going to put in a system that routes all your printing over here, and we're going to 9% of your document flow is going to literally just start becoming digital. And now we're like problem solving with people to the point that they dictate what it costs, and we provide it if we can, ultimately, for what it is that, that we want to sell it for. So I agree with you. I also think there's a journey here that we're skipping, that in our mind, we're just thinking, oh, it's a 25 page per minute machine at each location, and there's 7 locations. That means it's going to be an average of $4,100 with inner staple finishers, 2 paper trays, and a fax kit. Like, this is what we are so programmed to think like that. We have to stop thinking like that and start being more inquisitive and curious and really understanding where the buyer is coming from, and start doing things like talking about price before we even freaking get to it in the first place. Hey, like, I know this is our first meeting, but if I told you the budget was 20 grand for a solution like this, you'd probably tell me to buzz off and you'd get 3 different bids than mine, right? And it's simple thought process like that causes people to start to open up differently and keeps us in a credible state, is what I should say. And then price just becomes like a piece of the puzzle, more, instead of it being this like focal point at a certain part in the cell where it's like, oh, I'm feeling so good about this. I always ask the rep every time, and I feel like you guys can agree with this. When a rep is telling me, especially back when I was a VP of sales and I had my own reps, oh my gosh, I feel so good about this deal, I'm going to forecast it. Okay, but like, have they seen the price? Do they know what you're thinking for the budget? No. All right, well then it goes from a 90% to a 20% in that case.
Yep.
Like there's no way around that. It has to, because we shock and awe when we get to the price. Because again, like, we as salespeople make a living off of it, and ultimately, I have no problem with people making money. I'm a capitalist at heart, but I'm a capitalist at heart in the sense of that money is a byproduct of good deeds and great work. That's it. People will buy into you. I have 100% bet at tables with people and literally like told them, hey, I'm going on a $10,000 vacation with my wife for our 10-year anniversary with the commission I make off this deal. If you're not okay with that, I totally understand, but I just want you to know that you keep asking me to lower the price, and like, dude, you're going to make me have to skimp. I'm going to be buying, instead of a champagne bottle, it's going to be grape juice where I'm going, bro. So, can we talk about this a little bit more? And can you understand where I'm coming from when it comes down to the cost of these things? We're not human enough with people. We think in our head that people will be offended by that they'll say, oh, how could you tell somebody things like that? Bro, we're all living on the same planet, floating in the middle of nowhere in an infinite universe, trying to figure out what the F we're doing here right in the first place. And the more that we pretend that somehow everything needs to be taken so seriously and that we can't be honest, integral, and blunt with people, the harder it gets is the literal bottom line. You got me going, Art.
Good.
That's
good.
I've been doing this for forever, and a lot of the stuff that you speak about hits home, and a lot of the stuff that you do, I do, and it's actually a pleasure to hear somebody else preaching.
Yeah, you got to preach the preach. I tell you what, I've been saying that for the last 50 years. Okay, maybe not 50, but I don't know, dude. I mean, the management still manages to that damn quota. Everything we've said, we agree. I agree, right? 100%. And I know that customers agree with that. 100 prospects. Yeah, they want to be talked to like a person, not a transaction. They really, really do. Although there are some that'll just still transaction the whole thing. And then our managerial trainers and coaches inside the organization come up from being quota based and think that's the only way to move forward. Dale, how do you crush that? Or how does, everything you say resonates, right? And Art and I agree. And I'll bet you can get maybe 8 to 10 guys. All the new sales reps are going to say, yeah, that sounds good. A lot of it's going to go over their head, but still, it's going to make sense to them, and that sounds good. But how do you, Dale, address the culture of a quota-based managerial system? How do you do that?
We've got a great client in the medical device space.
All right.
That their average transaction is 150,000 in revenue for the EBITDA or EBITDA, however you pronounce it. It's like GIF and GIF, EBITDA. That's like the total EBITDA of the transaction. They personally want their reps to write a couple of deals a year. Okay. Now the sales cycle is very long, right? It's 12 months to 24 months. Okay. And so they're looking at, though, like, well, how do we, like, all of a sudden we're all really old and we want to start like ramping this up differently, and do we hire a bunch more sales reps, or do we get people to do high activities? Well, you know what they did is they got rid of quotas. That's what they did. They got rid of quotas, completely got rid of quotas, and they said, okay, guys and girls, this is what we're going to do. Instead of quotas, we're going to have budgets. And ultimately, you're going to be a very fiscally responsible person inside of this organization to a budget. You're going to use that budget to go and earn relationships, build trust, give better experiences, do everything that the typical sales rep is not doing. And you're going to win more deals by doing that instead of just 2 in a year. And like literally already these guys have seen such a radical influx and increase where like 2 has become 5. And this fiscal year is not even close to being over, and for them. And so the idea is that it's a risk. It's the concept. No leader that you or me or Art knows is really willing to necessarily do that. There are a lot that'll talk about and say, well, how do we do that? But this man, he's one of my idols, one of my heroes for sure. And it's been fantastic to work alongside them. But I mean, he just said, all right, let's see what happens and let's do this. And if it fails, it fails. But we've got to figure this out, and cracking the whip like we've always done and telling people to do more is not working. So let's instead just let them, basically be the stewards of their own outcomes. We'll give them a little bit more access. They even raised their salaries in the process of this to say like, hey, you got to do more work, essentially. And made them responsible for making the money they wanted to make. They also, we're talking about like, you got to bring passionate people in to be around a culture like that as well too. You cannot have a person that's like 30 years in sales and also has always been under the gun of a quota. Like, you got to find the next generation. And I hate to say it this way. It's unfortunate to even think that I have to say it this way, but it's the truth, because the other reps will just take advantage of it. In most cases, they're burnt out anyway. They'll be like, this is great. I don't have to really do a whole lot here, and I get paid really well, and I'll still sell a couple deals a year. So you have to find the passionate people that you go, hey, everybody tells you can make a lot of money in sales. I'm not going to tell you that once. I'm going to let you prove it to yourself. Here you go. And you got 12 months to show us what you can achieve, and ultimately show yourself what you're capable of. And we'll sit down at the end of the year and we'll decide, should you do it again? And if the answer is no, it'll be good for both of us. And if the answer is yes, it'll be good for both of us. These are the kind of things that conversations nobody wants to have, type of thing nobody wants to risk. But I'm telling you, even though it's, out of the total reps, you're talking like 60% of them are really bought in of the full rep count in this organization. Guys, 60% with an increase of, literally 150% at millions in revenue, right? We're not talking about hundreds of thousands in total revenue. We're talking about millions in revenue is game changing for your organization. So I just really think, guys, it comes down to the fact that you have to take the risk, and you need the kind of people around you like the rebellion or somebody else out there that's doing this and that understands the process to guide you throughout it to get the achievement, that you wish and desire to get.
Right. Hey, so Dale, when you mentioned budget, giving them a budget, they're giving them a financial budget to go out and do something different. Okay.
They basically take away things. They still have CRM access and things like that, but what they do is they say, all right, guys and girls, we're going to slim down a lot of these things because you should only be sending emails when you've come into contact with somebody and you're sitting in front of them at this point, or you're following up. You should only be making phone calls one at a time to people to let them know you're coming to that meeting that you just set up in person. They've switched the whole process of engagement to in person and to experiences. So they use direct mail. So they give them a budget and they say, this is how much money you can spend on your direct mail concepts. They get with us, obviously, we do those things for them, but they also give them the leisure to do it as they want to do it, to send the message effectively, to get it in front of somebody as a tangible concept instead of just, a digital email. Good morning. Wondering if you're looking to do X, Y, and Z, art with a question mark in the subject line. I mean, how many times it's so dead? All of it is just overplayed and overused. So they instead of saying, hey, you're all going to use direct mail and spend your own money, they also gave them a budget and said, here, you can spend this much a month, go get these things done. So, again, it's a risk. And a lot of people hear this and they go, that's crazy. Well, guess what? It's not that crazy. It's just you don't get a new boat this year for yourself and you stick that $80,000 back in your company and you distribute it out through your employees in the sales department. And then you make more than you ever thought you could. And then you, instead of taking that money, you do it again and again and again. And now you got legacy wealth. And then you just built, 10 millionaires in your company. And these are people that will stay loyal to your organization. They'll never forget what you just did for them. And ultimately, it takes everything to the next level on unprecedented and really immeasurable success rates, right? It's really the thought process. Because even when you come up with the statistics on these things, it's crazy to look at. It feels like smoke and mirrors. When I look at their returns so far, I'm like, what? No way. But it's real. It's real because people are taking the risk.
Hey, wow. So I got another question. So sorry, Greg.
No, go.
Desire. Dale, can you teach or coach desire in a person? Or is that something that just comes from, maybe you were born with it? Would like to know your thoughts on that.
I think so this is kind of like a two-pronged answer. I would say first and foremost, your upbringing and the way that you have been led in the younger years of your life has a lot to do with desire and passion and how you're going to lead with those things. Those two pieces of the puzzle are very important. But I also think that you can bring somebody into a state of being through your culture that they always deep down inside knew existed. They just thought that they were living it. But as they started to see how you were living it and how you were operating within it, they realized, oh, this is wrong. It's like this idea of, the old school concept of beer 30, like for a sales rep. So sales reps go out, they do a bunch of cold calls, and then, they cut and have beer for lunch, right? And imagine, and then these are sales reps, let's just say they've been in it for 10, 15 years and they can do things like that. But they have a 21-year-old kid coming with them. Well, that 21-year-old kid doesn't see, oh, I can do this one day soon. They see, oh, this is what sales is like. And it cultures bad habits within those people. They see them take shortcuts in the CRM or not use it at all. They see them push back on certain things inside of the organization. And because of that, nobody wins in those moments. You have to find not just people that in the new school, the younger generation that have that passion and ultimately want to achieve more. You also have to understand that you probably have a toxic bullpen right now, and not the buzzword version of that, a legitimate one where people are just sucking the money out of your bank to continue to live in their comfort. They don't give a living crap about you anymore, even if they say that they do. As soon as the door is closed, they got all kinds of complaints, and you're giving them the best lifestyle of anybody inside of the organization in the process, and they're taking advantage of you. So I think this is it's a deep issue is what it really ultimately is. But if I meet somebody that struggles with work ethic or scrolls their phone too much, or
Mhm.
is in an environment where everything's virtual and digital and doesn't like get on the phone with people in their generation. Those people can still, I still think that they can learn, the fire is in them. It's about who's willing to like light it up, who's willing to, because it starts with a spark, right? So it's little at first, right? So it takes perseverance from the leader as well too, just as much as it does from the person.
Interesting. Interesting.
Wow. Dale, you kind of swerved into it. Not a sensitive question, but is it a generational question? Is it a question of generation?
I don't want to say.
I asked it, so yeah.
I don't want to say that it's that either one or the other when it comes to the generation themselves are right or wrong. I think it's inherent,
Okay.
right? It's that
Okay.
it's like my dad was a baby boomer and he taught me hard work, but he also was like very present in the age of technology. So he also taught me how to work smart. And a lot of people didn't get my kind of upbringing because of that. So my father was willing to like look at the next generation and adapt to its mindset and see the good in it and say, here, this is the stuff we're going to take.
Perfect.
So I feel like really, if that's the thought process for everybody that's in the older generations, looking at the younger generations, the outcomes are different. And I think no matter what, that the younger generations are going to be rebels in the process, period. We don't do it that way anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh-oh. He got rebellious and threw his phone around. That's okay.
It came off my sexy little holder here on the back. It must be that hot that it's sweat right off the holder. Yeah. Anyway, so I think you get the gist of it, right? It's like
I do.
Yes, generational, but I think it's the other way around to an extent, just the same.
Yeah. I like to hear that. Yeah. So take it in a different direction now, and I'm going to be in probably I was going to ask this question. I'm going to ask it wide open though with you. What are your ideas and feelings on artificial intelligence?
I personally hate AI, and I'll tell you why. I hate it because it's cultivating this perspective for society that ultimately now they don't really have to do much. That instead of having to do much at all, that this thing will take care of everything for them. And really, like, it is such an amazing tool. We use it very consistently inside of our organizational chart. We do it in a way that's very smart as well too, but we don't let it replace like the basics, like human interaction, things that ultimately it can't replace is the thought process. I really think that we've taken it and we've said it can do everything. It can do everything, and it can do it all for me, and I don't have to waste my time on this stuff anymore. And with certain processes, fantastic. I freaking love AI. Right, but I actually genuinely don't like it at the same time too, because
there you go.
Again, I feel like it really has cultivated this mindset of like, oh, I just wrote 7,000 emails to this particular target market because I told AI these things, and I'm just like, Jesus in heaven. Now we're all about to get spammed by you and delete you and hate our email inbox, never open any email from anything that's potentially good because you're ruining it. And then you multiply that by every sales rep that's doing that. And all of a sudden, it's like a pandemic of AI.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a pandemic of mediocrity too. It's everyone's the same, which yeah, absolutely unfortunate if you look at it that way. And if I look at it as though, okay, instead of me doing 10, I could do 10,000 of the same thing. It waters down everything, no matter what process I use. Whether it's
I used it today for something new. And when you're out there prospecting, you have to go, maybe you got to go through LinkedIn, you got to go through the company's website if you're looking for the decision maker, and sometimes the decision maker is obscure. If you don't have a premium version of LinkedIn, you're kind of pushed back a little bit from finding the information you want. I used it today on 3 occasions to ask AI who is the decision maker in XYZ company. And there it is.
Did it work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it worked all 3 times. Now, it wouldn't give me their email address, but that's something I can stop in and find out.
It was able to provide you information that you didn't have before.
That
Right.
And it
that
was
would have
correct.
taken me, maybe an extra 30 minutes to 45 minutes to find by going through these different websites.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I just thought it was interesting.
Here's how I like to think about that, Art, is that like that's the side of it that's great, but also we have to equate that to like in our backgrounds, like an EDA list. Okay, so sure, it gave us the information, but like now what? Like it doesn't magically
Right.
give us the meaning of the business, right? So I love what you're saying, and I think again, like that's what it has to be used for. But so many people look at what you just said practically, and they go, "Oh, well, then it must." If I can do that, then I can easily like have it like then like tell me every single thought that that person has ever had that's good, and I can manipulate the living hell out of them and absolutely get a sale, through AI. And it like
No,
literally is how people
no.
operate within it. It's
Right.
great.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dale. Yeah.
I'm 67. I'm going to turn 68 in February,
No.
and I'm still knocking on doors anywhere from 1 to 2 days a week.
Dude, you look fantastic, by the way. If no one told you that this week,
You beat me to it.
that's the Friday win for you right there, baby.
Yes,
You
it
hit the quota.
is. Yes, it is.
Wow. Wow, Dale, that's some good shit right there. Seriously. I mean, I did some research on quotas years ago. I got pummeled for it, by the way, because I was effectively telling everybody, well, we shouldn't have quotas. That didn't work. What I found, and just a little point, is that it was driven from the OEMs, because the OEMs, and that was driven from manufacturing schedules, right? If they're going to make 6,000 copiers in Tokyo, then we better have enough people selling what's it come down to? 10 a month per whatever it is. And then that's your quota. It has nothing to do with relationships or anything like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
so,
go
go ahead.
Yeah,
Go. No, Art, I'm done.
You're done. So Dale, tell us a little bit about the event you're having.
That's going to be fun. We're almost at capacity. We've probably got about 35 tickets, 40 tickets left. It's going to be this first one's going to be a very intimate gathering. But when I founded the Sales Rebellion, I always wanted to make it a community. That's why I didn't call it Dale Dupree Sales Training or the Copier Warrior Sales Training. That would have pushed back to me and my brand a little too much. But instead, like the Copier Warrior exists inside of the Sales Rebellion, just as the packaging warrior and the termite champion, and everybody that has taken this mindset of ultimately choosing legendary and changing the game inside of the sales world. So this is the first one where we're getting all the rebels together in person. We're not doing speakers at this particular conference, and we never will. We're doing workshops. So people will go through 45 to 55-minute live workshops where there'll be a literal instance of, hey, we're doing this particular thing. We're doing it like X. We're breaking out into groups. We're getting it done in pairs, and then we're announcing winners at the end. And so like really challenging people from the perspective again of like, don't just come to sit around and learn, come to interact and learn, come to really truly get that personal development that we all desire to have within our lives, and then build community as well too. You'll probably meet somebody who could be a champion for you at an organization, could be connected to people that buy at companies that you're cold calling on, can ultimately just be a great friend or a peer that you can bounce ideas off of and, continue to sustain a successful sales career. But it's in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's September 26th, 7th, and 8th. Tickets are on thesalesrebellion.com/totality. We'd love to see people there. We got a good amount of copier people coming. It's probably about a third of the total makeup of the room. No manufacturers, just all private businesses, but some pretty gosh darn big ones, if you ask me. So it's exciting to see what we've got going on, and I'm really stoked to again just like do something that we've always dreamed of doing. I mean, you two know how I roll. I've known y'all since I started getting on LinkedIn, basically, and I love and appreciate everything that y'all do and have done for our industry. And I know that you've seen the wacky, zany, crazy stuff that I pulled off in my sales career. This conference will top those things 100%.
Cool.
Sometimes you got to be wacky in order to succeed.
Well, congratulations on that, Dale. I did not know that. So that's really cool. That's in Knoxville. Is that what you said? Is that what I heard? Knoxville? Okay.
Yeah, Knoxville, Tennessee, September 26th, 27th, and 28th.
And it's your first conference, whatever, I don't, first get together like this? Is that what I heard you say too?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, this will be the first time that we're bringing students plus the public community. You know, you don't have to be a student to come. There's a good amount of students and alumni from our program coming, but lots of strangers too, as we're calling them right now, right? And we're excited to just get everybody in the same room and see, like, what is the temperature of people in sales right now? Are they really willing to risk and start to do things different? Because we got Stu Heineck running a workshop, you know, New York Times best-selling author. We got Kevin Katie Dorsey, one of the greatest in the sales game from a leadership perspective and a sales process perspective. Leslie Vanette's going to come drop some wisdom on email. We got Enrica Greathouse running a fantastic storytelling program. I mean, y'all, we got like the best of the best coming to this thing to really, like, not just educate people, but to actively work alongside them to show them, like, hey, here's how we made our millions. Here's how we did it as sales reps, how we've done it as leaders, how we're continuing to progress the narrative of changing the way that people see sales and less of a negative stereotype, how we're feeling fulfilled through our actions, through getting what we desire, right? From our earlier conversation, that desire that we have deep down inside, like actually finding things that are applicable to it to make it more of a reality for us as sellers. So that's the purpose of it, the goal.
Amen.
And of course, you know, we're definitely gonna talk about legacy. We're definitely gonna talk about the emotional aspect and that side of what sales does to us. We support that side of the sales world openly and vulnerably, as you probably have seen in my content. So we'll have some fun stuff there as well too, because we want to shine a light on it and not make it depressing, you know, for lack of a better term to use. And ultimately, we want to start to help people. And really, like, what sales conference do you go to where they have like limited edition merchandise that you can buy, like, you know, and ultimately, what sales conference do you go to where you can literally hear from a procurement director on stage with a salesperson and have them, like, basically go head to head on what's better, right? And it's going to be a very challenging evening and day and morning, because we're doing, you know, Thursday 26th is Thursday night, 27th all day, 28th is just the morning, but it's going to be intense. It's going to be fun. And then, unless, like, at the end of it, we get a resounding, like, hey, great try, but that sucked. We're doing this every year from here on out. So.
Oh, that's great. It sounds good. It sounds good. I mean, sounds more like a peer-to-peer thing. I like that.
You take old timers like us?
Hey,
you guys are welcome to join us. And you can run your podcast live from the venue. We have a podcast station for anybody that wants to come and do that. So.
That's interesting.
So Dale,
yeah,
we're getting towards the
take us out, Art.
Witching hour. All right. And if you could just stay on after we close, I just got something for you. Hey, everyone. We're here.
Good
today.
session.
Yeah,
it's a great one.
Session. We're here today. Of course, we're ending the show. We're with Greg Walters and our buddy Dale Dupree with the Sales Rebellion. And please like, follow, share. See us next Friday at 4 p.m. Thanks all.